So it's post June 1st, and OTAs will be winding down at the end of this week. It's a combination of maybe a slight lull in what's going on with the Saints as far as potential roster changes, but expect it to pick up over the next couple of days, if not the next couple of weeks. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Right off the bat, this is the big thing happening after June 1st is we're going to process, or the Saints are going to process two retirements. Ryan Ramczyk and Derek Carr. Been known about this for a while on both of them. Um, Ramczyk since April 17th when he made the announcement that we all kind of knew was, well, we all knew was coming, um, with his knee issues over the years and the way that degenerated to the point where we knew last year when he was IR that we probably weren't going to see him on the field again, and that he confirmed that on the 17th. Shortly, a few weeks thereafter, shortly afterwards, Derek Carr, same thing, and announced his retirement. Real quick, we know that they had both gotten to the point where their base salary was only 1.255 million, the veteran minimum for their years of service, and that's kind of the cap based savings, but not really. We'll get to that in a second. Just the main issue was at this point after June, if doing it post June 1st, we're not taking the dead cap hit for both of them in a single year. We assume the part that was already uh, earmarked for 2025, but the rest of it isn't going to hit until 2026. The true cap savings are come after that because by this time next year, they'll both be off our books. Ramcheck to the tune of about 11.08 million of dead money, and Derek Carr 59.67 million dead. It's going to affect our cap space a little bit next year, but this isn't anything that they didn't know was coming at this point. So I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but it's not blindsiding them by any stretch of imagination. They have time to work around getting that dead money off the dead money's off the books, getting around the rest of the salary cap around it. And just as a refresher, dead money is referencing cash you paid to the player previously, but through the machinations that the Saints do to juggle the salary cap, they are accounting for it in future years. Well, when the player is no longer on your roster, all that money you kind of defer to future years that you've already paid the player comes due the second he's no longer in your roster. Or in the case of doing it post June 1st, the following year. So the overall effect for this year, really minimum at this point, because what's going to happen is as soon as they process the retirements of both of them, like we said, you're talking 1.255 million per salary. There's five players on are not on the top 51 because right now the top 51 salary players are used, their salaries are used to calculate the salary cap. So, and actually, Carr and Ramcheck go off. You're down to 49. You have to add two of the next players on, and they have Saints currently have five players, all with a salary of 1.170. So two of those will come into account. You do the math, and the difference is Saints are creating less than 200, about 170K, give or take, in salary cap space. So it's not really a huge big deal as far as that part of it, but I think it's just an overall scheme of things as we're doing. We keep talking about the rebuild, and that's where we're at this point. This is the cumulative effect of taking, you know, prior to their two restructures, and Ramczyk had done his um, with the intent of retiring. Everybody knew that. So pretty much most of that for this year was taken care of between those two deals. The 30 million is going to get credited of Carr's restructure. That portion of it's going to get credited back to the Saints. So in effect, that's all done deal. The real benefit is now we know. Now the Saints can proceed to move on with how they're going to handle their roster, not only for this year but in the next couple of years. Get the dead money off the books and be prepared to once that cap with additional, and we'll talk about that in a second, additional cuts coming. Once all that clears out, and then they've had the reset in the salary cap, and they've started resetting the roster. Now it's going to be the push forward. next part of this is I do believe you're going to see more roster. And this is a gut feeling, but it's starting to make sense if we're just kind of paid attention a little bit. What's been happening through this OTA process. We weren't quite sure what the Saints were going to do schematic on either side of the ball. Now we kind of getting some clear indication on offense. We talked about the offensive line. I think that was, we're going to bring in additional help. They did. They signed 3 players, but it's looking like that's their 3 primary backups, and then they're figuring everything else out as far as the remainder of the roster. Because for now, it seems they're set on that top 5, which would be um, Banks, Penning, McCoy, Ruiz, and Fuaga. But on the defensive side, we had no clarity, but that's starting to take shape in the last couple of weeks. Touched on it a little bit, but it sounds like we thought there could be maybe a transition from the 4-3 to the 3-4, the even to the odd man front through the course of the season, but it's starting to sound like we're getting a little more and more evidence coming out now that um, it may be more of a 3-4. And the latest today was an acknowledgement in NOLA.com, I believe it was, that both Chase Young and Carl Granderson have slimmed down some from their previous years of playing heavier to be that 4-3 edge player to that more, what we always kind of talk about, that prototype 3-4 edge rusher, where they're a little leaner, a lot less, I shouldn't say a lot less power, reliant less on power and more on getting to the quarterback and that being their primary job, which we talked about in the last video. We also talked about in the past, Asante Samuel Jr. has already been in for a visit. Now, right now, he's not going to be signing anywhere because medical procedure on his neck. He's supposed to get cleared hopefully sometime in July. That's going to really kind of kick in his free agency. He was with Brandon Staley in San Diego for 3 years. In fact, drafted by them. He played in that system. He understands what they're trying to do. They've already brought him in and had a visit with him. We just recently found out they had a visit with veteran defensive tackle or defensive lineman, Jonathan Bullard. Now, I recognized the name and I was kind of familiar with him, but I had to kind of go back and look him up. Age 31. So, yeah, we're kind of talking a declining player, but 6'3", 290s, 9 seasons in the NFL, drafted in 2016, 3rd round. He was a 72nd pick overall from Florida by the Bears, whose defense coordinator was Vic Fangio, and Brandon Staley was the outside linebacker coach. They called him basically the edge guy at the time. He was there from 2016 to 2018. Since then, 2019 and part of 2020 with the Cardinals, finished 2020 with the Seahawks, 2021 in Atlanta, 2022, 2023, and 2024 with the Vikings. Over that time, career 221 tackles, only 14 missed. He's got a 6.4% missed tackle rate, which is pretty outstanding. Gets his hands on you, you're pretty much going down. 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 8 passes deflected at the line. So, I mean, it's marginal what he's going to bring in the pass rush. I mean, his 9 years pretty much bear that out, but he's known as a run defender, and he's known as a plus tackler in run defense. Like 6.4% on misses over 9 years. It's an incredibly low number. A ton of experience in odd man fronts. He's basically been in the 3-4, base 3-4 package his whole career, because first 3 years were Vic Fangio in Chicago, but his time in Arizona was with Vance Joseph. In Atlanta, Dean Pease. With the Vikings, 1 year at Ed Donatella and 2 years of Brian Flores. Now, they all run different versions of a 3-4, but everything they do, whether it's coverage, because some of these guys like to go a little more blitz heavy, some of these guys like to go a little more zone. Flores, he's played 2 years in Flores' amoeba defense that he has running in Minnesota, which is kind of a mix and match of a lot of different things. And Bullard is very experienced and has played multiple spots along that defensive line, and he's played it pretty much with guys that this is their style of defense, and he's not spent a lot of time, if any, basically in an even man front. So you combine that with them bringing in Samuel earlier, kind of just looking for this familiarity. And these are the kind of free agents I use these two specifically because I know we've had some other talks and visits and stuff. In the case of Samuel, you're kind of adding a player that's kind of in his prime and a really good corner that in when he came in for the visit a few weeks ago, we talked about in the videos is really just tighten up that corner room and go, okay, we have one spot on our defense. We know we've got really good players all the way around. We talked in the last video about Alante Taylor trying to play more on the inside in that kind of star position. That's a playmaking spot with because of Isaac Yiadam's presence. Well, you throw in a Asante Samuel, that strengthens probably Taylor's role even more and can add some more flexibility in the way you use your other corners, like a Kool-Aid McKinstry, who we think pretty much I'm a huge Kool-Aid fan from what I saw. He's should help him out in his role in a little more versatility you can use him in because you have the experience and the depth to be able to do it now. Or a guy like Bullard is basically the same thing on the defensive line. Now, as a declining player at 31, and I'm using that term just because of age and going into his 10th year in the NFL. Look, he could be Calais Campbell and play another decade in the NFL and be pretty good. But odds are you're going to start getting less and less out of him. Just like Devon Godshaw, who we just traded for, basically the same situation as Bullard. So what I think I'm seeing is they don't want to wait for like a slow process to move the roster over to what Staley's going to need to run that 3-4. They're looking for pieces now, whether they're already on the roster and they've been working through OTAs, or can we go add somebody? And Samuel being a younger guy in his prime, okay, multi-year type deal going, probably worth it. I would think you'd be real interested to do that. Whereas you're looking at somebody like Bullard, much like Godshaw, look, veteran guys that are just going to kind of hold it down because either the guys we already have on the roster are going to figure it out, or some of them, they may not survive 2025. They may not make it through training camp or preseason and be right there on the final cut downs and never see the 53 when the regular season starts. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying they're giving the indication, yeah, we're willing to make that move. The salary cap stuff that has happened over this year, the pending retirements of Ramczyk and Carr being processed, kind of having that lump all fall in 2026 where well, we're going to take a little hit in dead money. So what's the difference of adding a little more if we have to slice off some more veteran players and take it all next year, knowing we're going with younger players? Or in the case of bringing somebody in like Bullard, maybe just on like a 1-year prove it deal where you can kind of make that transition ease through it through 2026. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but I'm feeling like right now you've got a little bit of a lull, so we can wait a little bit to process those two guys to see veteran free agents. And let's be honest, some of them probably don't want to mess with OTAs, which are basically voluntary. Minicamp next week is mandatory. So we may see some movement there, and we may be waiting a little bit to see if there's other players on other rosters who may be going down, um, being released over the next couple of weeks since it is post June 1st, and everybody gets to do the same thing with pushing some of that dead money and cap hit into 2026. Other players may be becoming available that we'd be interested to add. And I think the theme, at least on the defensive side, and I got to think if you're looking to add somebody in the offensive side at this point, you're probably thinking along the same lines. But defensively, are they familiar, comfortable, and can kind of get easily plugged in into that 3-4 scheme that Staley or some version of it that Staley can use? Or on the offensive side, somebody that's kind of worked with our offensive coaches, especially Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier, it makes sense at that point. As long as you're not locking into some stupid, ridiculously overpaid, too many year contract. But if you're just sitting here going, we need to get some veteran bridge players in to get to the point where, and it may take a year and it may take two, to kind of work through this, where we're still competitive. We still have a chance to win games. The younger players are good enough and can grasp this whole concept of what we're doing and then put, talent on the field to go make plays. Well, maybe we get through this faster. But this is more and more of a coaching staff. It looks like everything I'm kind of seeing when it does come out in video. And then when you get them, and I expect we're going to get some media availability at the end of this week when OTAs finish. But in their media availability, it's making it more and more clear to me that change is coming because they want to put their stamp on this team. They want their process. They're building a culture that they want to build. And I think those are all good things. It may be a little patient on our end, but I don't know. I'm thinking if they can push through this fast enough and push the right buttons, and I think that's the key. uh, Maybe some of our veterans go and some veterans come in that are more experienced or more familiar with this coaching staff. It wouldn't shock me. I'm not ready to say 100% it's going to happen, but I feel it's very north of 50% and climbing. I think minicamp may reveal a lot, and if we make any moves before minicamp, I think that's going to tell you an awful, awful lot. Just a quick one today, kind of covering. The June 1st post deadline thing is very important, but at the same time, not necessarily very exciting because you don't popping off moves that you may expect right away. But you get the feeling something may be brewing a little bit as far as the Saints are concerned. We'll see how it plays out, and we'll probably know a lot more at the end of OTAs. I'm expecting another media availability session with the coaches and the players, and I'm sure some of these topics about the roster moves are going to come up, especially if the retirements get processed sometime in the next couple of days. So, if you're first time here, please go ahead, like, share, subscribe, do all those things that feed the algorithm. Helps me out a whole lot. Be able to keep coming and see y'all on a regular basis. In the comments, hey, if you know of anybody else out there, because it's not the easiest thing in the world to kind of do what I did for Bullet since I was aware of him, but I didn't know everything about him by any stretch. And starting to see, where his ties are to some of the coaching staffs, because there may be some others floating out there that may be either free agents right now or possibly about ready to be free agents that kind of may fit the bill as far as the coaching staff and the organization looking for. I just hate to phrase it this way, but finding their guys to kind of help build a roster and push this along a little faster. So let me know if you know of any, and I'll go take a look at them. So also pop up the video from the last video. It'll be up here on um, last week OTAs because, like I said, I expect the next one coming out. It's going to be something very similar. Kind of the takeaways and the insight of where we're headed and how it's looking, how we're going to get there. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.